Okay, so this is the second part. We're almost done. We're going to talk about how fertility is influenced by culture. We're going to talk about demographic transition and what the world has in stock for us in the future. So let's try, this is really neat stuff. So fertility, a number of social and economic pressures affect decisions about family size, which in turn affect the population at large. In this section, we're going to examine both positive and negative pressures on reproduction. So a lot of these are cultural items, and I the reason I find it interesting is because I can see how some of them affect me even. Okay, so why do people want children? Okay, so factors that increase people's desire to have babies are called pronatalist pressures. Okay, so one reason is it could be that the children are the main source of support. Okay, um, if you remember, well, again, most of you are pretty young, okay? But once upon a time, um, if you had a farm or a ranch, what you had a large family. To have 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 kids was not unheard of because what the family was doing is they were growing their workforce. Okay, we need somebody to go break the soil. We need somebody to go sow. We need somebody to go reap. We need somebody to uh, milk the cows. We need somebody to, whatever. Now, because we moved away from that country life and our demand, it's shoot, it's almost unheard of. Okay, so a source of support for us, that was us in the United States as well. You know, here's this, especially elderly uh, elderly parents in countries without social security system. I know that this affects me. You know, um, my parents are both from Mexico. I was born here in Klamath Falls, but they have um, old concepts in their mind, and the old concept is whoever the firstborn is, they're responsible for taking care of mom and dad. Um, and to that ends, I ended up taking care of my father for 7 years after a car accident. You know, but that means a lot for me. What that means is that I'm not going to get married. It also means that I'm not going to have kids. It also means that I'm not going to move very far away from my house. Or if I do, when they need me, I need to move back. All these things have affected me. And, it's one thing to hear somebody say, oh, yeah, this is the way it is in this country. It's quite another thing when it's happening to you, you know. So, I've had to take care of my dad. And now, I'm working, and my mother is hinting that she wants me to take care of her. Uh, you know, really? Anyways, these things happen. So you have to have children to take care of you. Okay. Um, Often children are valuable to the family not only for future income, but even more as a source of current income and help with household chores. Right. So that's kind of the point I made earlier. If you have a farm, you have a lot of people to help you do work. If you have a large family, um, yep, quite the difference between life back then and life now, right? Back then, you needed quite a few people taking care of the farm. Now it takes a lot less. Um, So, highly developed countries, we're among them. Higher education and personal freedom affect women to not have children. Okay, so this is anything that you say for a developed country, you can say the opposite for a non-developed country. In a highly developed country, um, higher education is expensive. So if you're gonna have a child, you have to have that thought that you have to give that child an education, and that's gonna cost money, right? We're not the worst at this. Imagine somebody in Japan. Imagine somebody in Singapore. In Japan, children literally commit suicide. In South Korea, children commit suicide because of the ridiculous stress that is placed upon them to become competitive in the academic environment. And then once they make it in, assuming they don't kill themselves, mom and dad have to pay for very expensive colleges. In Japan, to educate a successful Japanese person is very, very expensive. Okay, so that's something that you look at. Uh, in developed countries, what else? What else has to happen? Well, you have to have the child. It's not going to happen at home. It's going to be in a hospital, and hospitals right now, the costs are through the roof. Um, I'm telling you, anybody who has a child has to really think about it these days, because between healthcare and education and just outright the cost of raising a child, it can disseminate an economic household. Um, by contrast, in developing countries, um, feeding and clothing doesn't cost very much. They don't have to have education. Heck, mom doesn't have an education. Dad doesn't have an education. Why should the kid have an education? Um, Having one more child is not that big of a deal. They're not going to go to the hospital. They're going to have him at home. If they're lucky, they have a midwife. They might not. Shoot, the child might not survive. That's the whole purpose they're in a developing country, because child mortality is so high. There's an expectation that I need to have more children because not all are going to make it to a ripe old age to take care of me. So there's a lot of pressures here in developing countries to have more children. Okay. Demographic transition. It's important for you to know this because this is the heart of this chapter. Okay. Demographic transition is a typical pattern of falling death rates and birth rates due to improved living conditions that usually accompanies economic development and stabilization. If you have one statement to tattoo on yourself during this chapter, this is it right here. Okay. And I keep on asking two items. What are they? Falling death rates and birth rates. That's one. Due to improved living conditions that accompanies economic development. That's two right there. In other words, you're becoming industrialized, you're becoming technologically advanced as a consequence of lowering birth, uh, 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 death rates and birth rates. Now, which one is the chicken and the egg? We don't know. We do not know which one is cause and which one is effect. That's how intimately intricated these two are. We don't know if it's the falling uh, 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 death rates and birth rates that drive economic development, or if it's economic development that drives the falling death rates and birth rates. We really don't know which one is cause and which one is effect. We know that they are both like this. Okay. Look at our demographic transition here in the United States. Look at our population. Boom. And then we have the end of World War II in 1947. 1947. And anybody that can't have a child does. We have a boom. And then over here we have a baby echo boom as a consequence of all these people over here. But look at what happened to our population as we became industrialized. Isn't that something? Just incredible. Okay, you need to know these 4 stages. Okay, pre-modern. Okay, so we're looking at this stage right here, Economic and social conditions change mortality and births. So what's going on here? We have a condition in which infant mortality is high. Those are red. And as a consequence of that infant mortality, the birth rate is equally high. So a high birth rate, the blue, is a response to the high infancy death rate. So a lot of my children are dying. Consequently, I have to have more children to make sure that they survive. Amusingly, at that point, the total population is stable. See that? Because birth rate and infant mortality are keeping each other constant. So total population stays about the same. So that's pre-modern society. This is what you call a third world country, pre-modern. Then we hit stage 2, urbanizing or industrializing. Okay, that's all we have is these 4 stages, unless you go to the discussion board where we found a 5th. Okay, if you're answering your questions on this assessment, these are the 4 choices that you have, nothing else. Okay, so now we're entering stage 2, urbanizing or industrializing. Economic development in stage 2 brings better jobs, medical care, sanitation, and generally improved standards of living, and death rates often fall very rapidly. So look at what's going on here. Okay, we're having better conditions, better health care, better medicine, right? And as a consequence of that, the infant death rate just plummets. Now, what's happening to the infant birth rate? It has stayed the same. Why? Because this population is not convinced. They have a wait and see concept about, let's see where this ends up. I am not convinced that everybody's going to survive. Okay, so I'm going to stick to the way it was in the old ways. Really, this is true of everything. This is called a paradigm shift. It looks like my children are surviving, but I don't believe it. I'm not going to trust it. So I'm going to have a high fertility rate. Now, this is a hiccup. Why is this a hiccup? Because if child death rate decreases, but the birth rate stays the same, the population is going to start increasing exponentially. Do you see that? That's a J curve right there. This is a problem. Okay. Anytime they have a total population start to increase, you have to be weary. Stage 3. So we're right here. Note that the population grows rapidly during stage 3 when death rates have already fallen, but birth rates remain high. So here we are in stage 3, and death rates are decreasing nicely, and birth rates we have finally had a paradigm shift. Okay, so people are now convinced. Yep, it looks like my my sons and daughters are going to survive. So the birth rate, the fertility rate decreases. However, it doesn't decrease fast enough to keep this population from increasing. Because this population increase is that minus this. You see how big that is? There's a big gap. So we have a very fast population increase during stage 3. Why is this worrisome? Because if we do not complete stage 3 quickly and bring this total population down to a steady state quickly enough, this increase in population is going to undermine the efforts of the demographic transition. Having these two things happen together is good, but it is not enough. This has to happen quickly enough so that this population increase doesn't take away resources from this demographic transition. Does that make sense? So that's very, very important. And then stage 4, post-industrialized, stage 4 represents conditions in which developed countries where the transition is complete and both birth rates and death rates are low, often a third or less than those in the pre-developed era. So notice, whoops, sorry about that. Notice that now they have, before they were next to each other, now they're next to each other again. But the total population has reached equilibrium. And now that country is industrialized. They have a low infant death rate, followed by a low infant birth rate, followed by a better economic development and stabilization. That's good for everyone. Okay. Let's say many countries are in a demographic transition. So who might you ask? Some countries have had remarkable success in population control. Thailand, China, Colombia, for instance, total fertility has dropped by more than half in 20 years. Morocco, Jamaica, Peru, and Mexico all have seen fertility rates fall by 30 to 40%. So these are examples of countries undergoing demographic transition a little bit slower, but it's happening. Let's see. We've already talked about the fact that demographic transition can happen in one of two ways. One is, of course, control in population, and the other one is increase in economy. Okay. So that's what these individuals are doing. Andhra Pradesh, this is a state in northern India, have adopted a strategy of aggressively emphasizing birth control rather than promoting social justice. So instead of making sure that everybody gets quote unquote what they deserve, we're going to emphasize lowering the birth rate. This social justice strategy assumes that the world has enough resources for everyone, but inequitable social and economic systems cause maldistributions of those resources. So again, social justice is the belief or understanding that we have enough for everybody. If not everybody is doing well, is because we are not distributing the resources properly. The social justice. Improving women's lives helps reduce birth rates. This is very, very important. Okay. So the Conference on Population and Development agreed that the following were necessary to slow population growth. Responsible economic development. Again, that's key. That's one of the two keys. We haven't moved away from it. One is population, the other one is economy. Okay, so if you drive economy, you're also going to bring the fertility down. So if you can instruct people into adhering to responsible economic development, that's desirable. Education and increased women's rights, because all the evidence shows that the more educated and that the more literate that women have and the more rights that they have, the more likely that they are to choose having less children. Okay, high quality health care, including family planning services. This is important because, again, if we can bring the infant death rate down, that will bring the fertility rate down. As a fact, this last point addresses this. There has never been a sustained drop in birth rates that was not first preceded by a sustainable drop in infant and child mortality. So you're not going to have you're not going to convince people to have less children unless you first convince them that the children that they have are going to survive. That's the way it's going to work. Here's education versus fertility. Okay, so this is high school. Okay, and then over here is fertility rates. So notice that Ethiopia, with a fertility rate of almost 7 children per woman, has almost zero secondary school. Where if we go to Vietnam is good. If we go to Vietnam, fertility rate is industrialized. This is industrialized. You can see that at least 60% are enrolled. The women are enrolled in high school. Okay, that's supposed to drive something home, because again, these are effectively industrialized fertility rates, and we're not saying that these poor women need to be in college. We're just saying that they need to be literate, they need to be educated, and they need to have women's rights. This is just high school. Okay, family planning. This is important because a lot of people misunderstand what family planning is. Family planning allows couples to determine the number and spacing of their children. Family planning does not necessarily mean having less children. It just says that you get to control how many children you have and when you have them. Why is this important? Because typically the word is control. If you give people, if you empower people and you allow them to make the choices, the evidence suggests that they make better choices. It's about empowering people. If you want a lack of success, the solution is simple. Force everybody. This is what you're going to do. If you don't want people to follow you, you force them to do something. If you want people to follow you, what you do is you pretend, you make the suggestion that this was their idea, and then they'll follow you to the ends of the world. Okay, this was their idea. So if you empower people and you go, look, we're not telling you to have less children. We're telling you to decide when to have children. That is empowerment, and they can make better informed decisions. Okay, you're gonna have questions about methods of contraception, and there's a lot of methods of contraception out there, including vaccines. Vaccines for women are important because uh, like in sub-Saharan Africa, you know, the fertility rate is only half the problem. They have the problem, it's HIV. So these poor women are being killed. They're being impregnated and they're being killed. So we're trying to bring about vaccines that will work not only as contraceptives, but also as prophylactics against viruses. And we're trying to protect the lives of women. Okay. And along contraception, we also have mechanical, which consists of condoms and IUDs in women. Okay. So this should not be a surprise. We went to the United Nations and we looked at this. Okay. What are the world population projections by 2050? And at medium, we're looking at about 9 billion, high about 10.5 billion. If we don't stop being exponential, that would be about 13 billion. Low would be about 8. And really, we're thinking that we're going to hit high. So let's take a look at this. This is really neat. Fertility rates by country. So we're looking at 0 to 1. That's below replacement. That's not what we want, incidentally. That's dark blue. So we're looking at Canada. We're looking at China. We're looking at Russia. Look at this. We're looking at the majority of Europe, except for France. Incredible. Australia. So when we say that Western Europe is an old and decreasing in population, we're not kidding. Okay. Look at where's Japan at? Here's Japan. There's China. There's Japan. Below replacement. Okay. We want to be in the light blue to green is where we want to be. So light blue. Here's Brazil. Green, United States, Greenland, South Africa, South America, some of Central America. Look at India. The only reason this is green is because this should be in the red and this should be in the blue. So they probably average out to green. Okay. Look at sub-Saharan Africa. You can go all the way to purple in sub-Saharan Africa. Here's Yemen, 7 to 8. Here's Kenya in the yellow. But all of this is sub-Saharan Africa. So that's why whenever we discuss world population, we're talking India, China, United States, sub-Saharan Africa. Very important. Okay, I hope I didn't bore you guys too much. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. Okay? Bye-bye for now.